Okay, so that 12-mile limit that existed around the coastal areas for Irish vessels only was an effort to preserve the Irish fishing industry and to give them, I suppose, a bit of a head start in terms of development and improvement. So, farmers, for the most part, supported joining the EEC because of CAP. CAP is the Common Agricultural Policy. Um, but fishermen were worried about some of the concessions that existed within the treaty negotiations in terms of, especially in terms of other nations, other countries being able to fish in Irish waters. And that bothered fishermen because, especially with Spain and Portugal, and we looked at that a lot, they're much larger, much more developed, much more um, efficient vessels, a much better industry, which meant that they could kind of clean up around Irish waters, which were heavy with stocks. But there was a push within the treaty negotiations to form an agreement that would support agriculture because agriculture was such a massive part of the Irish economy. So the Common Agricultural Policy, CAP, was extremely important. And Jack Lynch and Patrick Hillary and the negotiation team wanted to make sure that the Irish agricultural industry was well looked after. And because the fishing industry was so small, so underdeveloped, and I suppose contributed so little to the overall catch total, the overall gross national profit, that they felt that they could make some concessions there. There was a referendum, an Irish referendum in 1972, to join the EEC, and it was a landslide. And it highlighted how insignificant the fishing industry was, that nowhere else in the country was there any concerns about the fishing industry. So it just proved, I suppose, the fisherman's point that Ireland was far below any sort of European standard. So in 1973, Ireland joins the EEC. In 1975, Iceland declares a 200-mile protected zone. Okay, so a zone around its own waters to protect its industry. The EEC followed suit in 1976 to protect the waters from international fleets. And in 1976, Gareth Fitzgerald, our old pal, won recognition from the EEC for the Irish industry's right to expand. Okay, so what Fitzgerald did here in his negotiations was that Ireland needed time and opportunity to develop the industry. If they were to be considered the same as, and I'm using Spain and Portugal again as an example, if they were to have the same rules as Spain and Portugal, well, how could the Irish industry ever hope to match that? So they were always going to be behind. So Fitzgerald won the right for the Irish industry to expand, so to give Ireland more of a head start. So they were able to get 300 more vessels and more advanced processing plants. So they got huge investment to develop the catch, and that is called the Hague Declaration. So in 1974, we have the establishment of the Killybegs Fishermen's Association. It later becomes the Irish Fishermen's Organisation, which we talked about way back at the beginning of this slide. It's led by a guy called Joey Murren. They're a lobby group to represent the rights of fishermen during the accession process. And I suppose they're the equivalent of the Irish Fishermen, or the Irish Farmers Association, the IFA. And they wanted a 50-mile limit around the coast for Irish vessels only. And they staged protests across ports and harbours across the country, but they were unsuccessful. And they eventually accepted defeat in 1978. Murren was a constant outspoken critic of the Common Fisheries Policy, and he believed it would be detrimental to the Irish industry, and that Ireland needed more support and more investment. So the Common Fisheries Policy was a number of years in